Welcome to the Inspire Me podcast. Welcome, dear listeners. My name is Leonie Lam. I am a career coach, corporate trainer, and speaker. And today our topic is how to prepare for senior executive service SES interviews. We have Lisa, who is here with us. She's the founder and also an interview coach. Lisa, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Leonie. I am thrilled to be here and chat with you as always. Thanks for inviting me. I'm great. How are you?
I'm very, very excited because I think it's going to be a great learning opportunity for myself and for everyone else who's listening. So thank you for being here today. So I'm going to introduce you in terms of how I know you personally, and then I'll just talk a bit about your background. So how do I know Lisa? A few years back, I delivered a webinar on mindfulness through the Career Development Association of Australia, and Lisa had listened to the webinar afterwards, after I delivered the webinar. She then kindly reached out to me and sent me this beautiful email saying that she really learned some great tips on mindfulness. And then I reached out to her and I called her and had a chat. And that's how we know each other. We haven't met each other in person, but over recent years, she's really encouraged me in terms of my to create meditations for my business, a little side hustle that I do. And then more recently, I've also produced a meditation to help people prepare for job interviews. So Lisa really, truly inspired me to do this, and I will share that with you soon as well. But professionally, Lisa is an executive coach, an interview coach, and she's been in business for about 7 years now. Her business is called The Interview Coach. So in terms of her background, being a coach, she's worked with individuals to help them maximize their personal presentation and use behavioural interview strategies to demonstrate their capabilities. She's interviewed hundreds of candidates and worked with more than 1,000 candidates in terms of their interview preparation, and I'm assuming successful in their job applications, of course. She's got, her background includes more than 20 years experience working in sales, management, training, counselling, and coaching in a variety of organisations. She also holds a master's degree in counselling and a certificate in training and assessment. And both of us are professional members of the Career Development Association of Australia. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Leonie. Thank you for that lovely intro. I sound so smart. I hope I live up to it.
You are smart. What are you talking about? we coach. We have a role to coach people. So we've got to be knowledgeable, probably a better word to use.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it. So dear listeners, the first question is really to get to know Lisa. So first questions around, tell us a bit about your career, your business journey so far.
Yes, well, my career journey was, I didn't end up where I thought I would. The most salient experience for me was going on a gap year when I was just finishing high school and got very interested in travel and ended up studying art history. And Leonie, as a career development professional, how many art historians have you worked with in your day?
Not many.
Not many. So as we know, there's not a whole lot of job opportunities in that area. But it still has always been a great love of mine. And I fell into working mostly in sales. And then I retrained in psychology. One of my friends at that stage said to use my powers for good as opposed to being a salesperson. But I found that the combination of having a sales background and having a counseling background has really all come together to make me well suited to help people who are getting ready for job interviews, because it is about trying to sell yourself. And it is a very nerve-wracking experience, which is why that mindfulness piece is very helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. And tell us a bit more about your business. I know clearly I've looked at your website and you clearly just focus on interview coaching, but just tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so the reason that I ended up starting my business was that, as I said, I had had a long career in sales, and the role that I had been made redundant. and I was connected with an HR company to support me for my career transition. And based on the fact that I had the Cert 4 in training and that I had a counseling master's, they put me on working with their organization. And one of the things that they were doing in Canberra was having consultants sit on public service interview panels. And there's a very rigorous process, as I think you're probably aware, working in that space too, where it's not just you give a good answer and you get full marks. You have to match a particular framework. And I could see that there was a lot of candidates who weren't matching it, who weren't giving the kind of answers that they needed to get the marks they needed to be chosen. And so I just wondered to myself, gosh, could this be a business? Could somebody who can train people, can train salespeople, who understands this framework, who can make a safe space for people to practice this, could this be a business? And so I reached out to CDAA, the Career Development Association of Australia, and based on my master's, which included career counseling, and my Cert 4 in training, which obviously means I have an understanding of working in the vocational education space, I was able to gain professional membership. And with that, I hung up a shingle and began working, and saw that it was indeed a niche that wasn't particularly well met and that was very much needed.
Yes, I can see in your website you've clearly been on many panels yourself, government panels, and
Hundreds.
certainly
Yeah.
when you see that gap when candidates, they get the feedback like, okay, just use the STAR interview technique to respond to the questions. And I was like, well, what does that mean? I did use, and
Yeah.
candidates, clients will tell me, I do use that technique, but how can you elaborate? It's only when you, through coaching, how you help
Yes.
clients to actually then work through that and help them present themselves and demonstrate those capabilities. Yeah.
Yeah. And Leonie, where I think the gap is that people can prepare and learn, but until they get feedback, they can't see where the gap is. And an interview is basically a test. And if you were to, sit a test, but you never received a mark, how would you know how you went? You wouldn't.
Yes.
So that's the bit that we do together where I can say to a candidate, okay, this part's great, keep that. There's a gap here. We need to add that for you to get full marks. And that's the magic, I think, is the assessment piece and the feedback.
Yes, I really like that. The mark, what's the gap, and how can we get full marks?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And most of the time the candidates don't see the mark. So how do you know?
No, no
Yeah.
idea.
Yes.
It's just a mystery, and they just keep going back, and most people try to prepare in a similar way each time. And they're on the right track in that they consider the job, they consider the questions, they think up answers, they get them ready, but then it means that they don't answer the question in the minute and they don't demonstrate the behaviors. And even though they've given some brilliant example, it's going to fall flat. So the feedback is the key part.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in your business or in your career, can you share with our listeners a setback in your that has influenced you to become the person you are today?
It's funny, I kind of pondered this question a bit, and I feel like I don't necessarily see things like setbacks, So that one was kind of hard for me. Even things like the redundancy that I had that ended up in me starting my business, I saw that more as an opportunity than a setback. But one of the things I did reflect on that was a wonderful opportunity that happened that I did see as a setback was when I first started my business. It was back before the pandemic when we used to do things live, Leonie, face to face in an office with people. And I had sublet my office from a psychologist in my neighborhood, who kindly allowed me to do this for very short term and not too expensive. So it was a great way for me to test the waters and see if my business would work. And then she decided to move. And so I no longer had my office. And I was like, what am I going to do? I can't go pay thousands to rent an office somewhere. And so the lucky break was that I connected with an organization called the Canberra Innovation Network, CBRN, which for folks in Canberra, really encourage you to reach out to them. They support small businesses and entrepreneurs. They have great co-working space. It was amazing networking opportunity. I've made lasting friendships. So that was a catalyst for a big change, which has been brilliant, and I'm grateful for that.
I really like how you see, you said like a redundancy, you saw it as an opportunity. And I think if when we both coach clients who their roles are made redundant and their whole world falls apart, and by essentially reframing it as an opportunity for closing one door and then opening up another door. So really, really love that. Thank you. And of course, networking is just unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, we are here right now because you sent me an email.
Yeah.
And I picked up the phone to call you. So it's not hard. Some people think of networking and think, well, it's really hard to reach out to people. People get nervous, but really it's just making that time, effort, send an email, send a really nice, when I received your email, it was a really kind email, compassionate email. And it just moved me that I felt so, I picked up the phone and called you just to have a chat. So that's, and when in reference to careers, I think, people need to do that more often to build their relationships. So it sounded like that network is something to look, if you're in Canberra in business, look into it.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested, I guess, from my perspective as well as from our listeners who might be interested in interview coaching with yourself. Can you walk us through what does a coaching program look like? And then after that, maybe provide an example of a client that you assisted? Yeah.
Absolutely, Leonie. So I've chosen to provide a really pretty specific niche in interview coaching. Like a lot of folks in our profession kind of do the end-to-end. They do applications and LinkedIn and interview coaching and what do I want to be when I grow up and all of that other stuff. But my niche is really quite narrow, and I solely help people prepare for job interviews and almost exclusively for public service job interviews. And so that includes both Commonwealth public service, but also state and territory, and sometimes even things like local councils. Because as we know, these processes have to be robust and they have to have parameters around them. And it's not intuitive how to do that. So my business is all about helping people understand, lift the veil on that mystery and know what they need to do. So the way it works with me is folks typically reach out either when they've been invited for an interview, or potentially they may know that a particular job that they're interested in is being advertised and they expect to interview and they need to prepare for it. And I do something probably a bit different than many interview coaches. I think a lot of interview coaches would focus on, common interview questions and good answers, which you can easily Google. But I take a very different approach. I take an approach that every single job is bespoke. Even if it's at the same level, if it's APS 6 or SES Band 2 or whatever, it's still specific in terms of what it has to deliver. So my first step is getting that job ad and going through it with a fine-tooth comb, following every hyperlink that's in it, and often there's half a dozen or more, and really seeing what this job has to deliver for the department, for government. And then I look at the candidate's application and their resume to say, okay, you're qualified for this job, but what's your special brand of magic? What can you bring to this that's going to distinguish you? So if people go, well, why should we pick Leonie over somebody else? Well, there should be a really clear message about that. So we start by crafting that message. And then through that job ad, I will have crafted specific questions. I never use the same ones job by job. I take them from the words of the job ad, particularly the verbs of the job ad, because that's what's being assessed. And I craft specific questions and I align them with whatever the capability framework is. So your listeners may have heard of things like the Integrated Leadership System, which is the Commonwealth capability framework. New South Wales has one. it happens to be my personal favorite. Whoever wrote New South Wales, love your work. They're just really clear, and they make it really clear in their job ads what they're assessing for. But anyway, this is something that, you know, for most candidates, it's just like, I don't know what this thing is, but I do, and I know that it's the assessment, so I align our questions. And then we do lots of practice out loud. And what this does for folks, and this is why I'm so grateful for your mindfulness practice, is that it's so difficult for people. It puts them in such a vulnerable spot. And being able to do that in a safe place and practice out loud and get constructive feedback and continue to refine is the thing that I think is of most benefit, and for helping them see where those gaps are in line with those capability frameworks. So that's pretty much how it works. Now, one of the things that you know about me, but the listeners might not, is that I'm a digital nomad. So we sold our home in Canberra about 9 months ago, and we travel around Australia. So I do all of my work via video conference like this. So that's the format for the coaching. And for most people, that means they can be at home, which is more comfortable for them. They like that. And that's about it. So for most folks, I do a minimum of 2 sessions because it's a very targeted individual process. It's not something out of a can. For folks who are going for a senior executive role, typically we would do anywhere between 4 and 8, or sometimes even 10 sessions, because it's a much bigger strategic landscape that we, you know, have to get the person used to talking about, but in a concise way.
Before going into an actual example, just so people who actually don't have a clue about this, it sounds really comprehensive, right? Targeted, the work that you do in researching the role, reading the role description, aligning it to the various frameworks. It takes a lot of effort and time.
Yes.
So if you are brand new, if you don't work in the public Australian public service, certainly it's really useful to have a coach to support you through the journey, and like you said, identify the gaps, give you feedback, and take it from there. So what you just shared, Lisa, it sounded like there's a lot of customization, bespoke work, that you do.
Yeah, precisely. And I think that that's how you can speak to the strategic piece, which is why probably increasingly more of my work is at the senior executive level, because it's at that kind of whole of government view. And because I only work with folks, well, mostly, I don't refuse people outside of government, but most people come to me within government. And that means that I have, because I research everything, I have familiarity across wider government initiatives that have a lot of overlap.
And I really love what you said about working on the special brand and building that into the coaching. So that's awesome. And so, Lisa, in terms of an example, do you have an example you can share with us?
Yeah, and de-identified, of course, Leonie. As we know, we must protect people's confidentiality, but somebody comes to mind that I worked with a couple of weeks ago who was an individual, still is an individual, that works for a very well-known international organization, and had never worked in the public service, and was interested in transitioning into the Australian public service at the senior executive level. And this individual reached out to me when they were invited to interview. And again, someone very educated, very accomplished, decades of experience, well suited for the job. And again, coming from a mindset of interviewing in the private sector, which is where I've spent most of my career, so I know how that works. And it's usually much more conversational. And so folks like that come to it thinking like, okay, here's my stories, and I've crafted my star stories. We all know about those. And the person wanted to send me their star stories, and I said, no, I don't want them, because you will have crafted them for a make-believe question, or you will have just crafted them in their own right. And they have to be made to match a question I give you. And I know this sounds maybe a bit pedantic, but this is a huge difference, because you have to be demonstrating capabilities and behaviors. It's not the story the panel's looking at, it's the behavior you're demonstrating, and that it's at level. So I politely declined. I said, look, hang on to your stories. We are going to use them. I don't want to read them as they're formulated now, because I want to help you translate them into answers to the questions we're working on. And so I went through my usual process, which is to very carefully read through the job advertisement, to craft questions against that capability framework, to practice them with the candidate. And again, I think some of the value I was able to add to this person was the fact that they were based overseas and working for an international organization and had less of a scope of the wider whole of government view that I was able to help them point towards, to make sure that they looked at around all the right corners, so that they could make their presentation. And very happily, they were successful in their role, which was great. And they emailed me the next day and said that was the best interview I've ever had. And I completely redid the way I usually approach things. And as we said, we had every expectation that would work in the public service, and it did.
Congratulations, Lisa. Especially for individuals who have never worked in the public sector. Going into an interview can be quite, a panel interview can be quite out of their comfort zone. It's very different to private sector. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Leonie, if there's something I can touch on here, I would really like to, because I think it will resonate for you and your listeners as well, because it has everything to do with that sort of mindfulness piece and about the stress of the interview. And, humans are hardwired to work in groups. And when you are in front of a panel like that, that is at a physiological level just about the most dangerous thing you can put yourself through. Because what you're doing is you're putting yourself forward to be assessed by senior members of your tribe, basically. And it's extremely vulnerable, and it physiologically shuts people down, as I'm sure you're aware. You really can't access your cognitive function if your stress response has taken over. And that's what happens to people. And so being able to practice in a comfortable environment helps settle that down. But there's so many people who just don't even engage with the process because of that. And it's a real shame, because they'd have an awful lot to share. But having to sit through the interview, it's like, forget it. I'm not prepared to do that. Yeah, it's rough.
You just reminded me, Lisa, that it's actually critical for a candidate to practice, because of that stress level, that if you don't practice and if you don't prepare, going into that environment for the first time is very confronting. I mean, I've been conducting interviews recently, and the candidate's completely stressed, just sitting in front of 3 people, like freaking out, stressed. So by practicing with you or any other coaches, it does reduce that stress level significantly, because at least you've already got some examples, some really good stories to share that's relevant to the role. But if you just go in there completely not prepared, you fail for the first time, it's going to leave a very uncomfortable, negative feelings about government interviews, and you'll be terrified the next time you go. So yeah, practice. Yeah,
absolutely. So Leonie, there are 2 things that I recommend for candidates around that are companion pieces to managing that. And one is that mindfulness piece of doing some breathing, getting centered, not allowing your body to go down that stress response that it wants to go down, and practice in a similar environment. So if you think about it, students in New South Wales, if you sit the HSC, you used to practice HSC. You have fire drills at work. If you have something stressful you have to do, you do it ahead of time, because that does, exactly as you said, that will allay a lot of the stress. So two key points, very, very key.
Yeah, thank you. And which I think you may have already answered the next question, which is if you only can give one tip, just one tip for SES interviews, what would that be?
Well, if for SES interviews, it actually is a bit different. Well, look, and this is probably a tip that I would give for lots of interviews. I would say my tip is to look out before you look in. So reflecting, Leonie, on what we've been saying about how people feel in the interview and how stressed they are and how, they're sitting across from what feels like a firing squad with all eyes on them, you think it's all about you, but you and I both know, sitting on the other side of the table, it's about us. It's about what we're trying to, the talent we need to get so that we can deliver for our organization. And so candidates who can speak to what the panel needs by looking out, especially on that strategic big picture, and at the SES level, again, that's whole of government. What is Department of Health doing for whole of government? That to me is the thing that really grabs your panel, because you're sitting across from a table of other senior executives, and that's their world. That's what they have to deliver. So look out before you look in would be my one piece of advice, and do that broad research.
I love that. Look out before you look in. Yeah. Okay, so now some questions that's more so personal questions in reference to a book. If you were to give away a book as a gift to somebody, what's the name of that book and why?
So I thought about this one a bit as well. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So it really depends on who I'm giving the book to. But I decided to choose a favorite book that I think would resonate with listeners who are getting themselves ready for that difficult scenario of the public service interview. And one of my favorite books is a book called Presence: Bringing Your Boldest Self to Your Biggest Challenges. And it's written by a Harvard social psychologist called Amy Cuddy. And lots of people might know her. You're nodding already, Leonie,
Yes.
so maybe you know her. She did that very famous TED Talk on power posing.
Yes.
And I've heard it's like it's like the second most viewed TED Talk of all time. And her research very much links back to what we were talking about this physiological response, that by adopting an expansive body posture, like hands on hips, like Wonder Woman, that you raise your testosterone and lower your cortisol, the stress hormone. So physiologically boosting you for something like an interview. And she has a very interesting story, because she endured a catastrophic accident as a young person, and was just really had to fight back to get her health back, and also had her research questioned. And her study has been replicated, so it's solid. But brilliant book. My copy has just sticky notes all through it, because it's just full of all those little gems. So for folks who are feeling that stress of going to an interview, I think it's a very empowering read.
Yes, I do know about that power pose. I've actually coached people. Sorry. All right, let's
Yes.
walk. Let's walk together.
Let's do it. Yeah, 100%.
And it does definitely make you feel more confident, prepare yourself physically, mentally, emotionally going into that interview. And in terms of ask all guests this question, I'm just curious as to what is one thing that you do every day that makes you happier and or bring you joy, Lisa?
Well, certainly mindfulness. And but look, more than that, Leonie, full disclosure, I love to cook. And I love to eat. So cooking and eating every day, I never feel like at the end of a workday that it's a chore to cook. And traveling, it's just been brilliant to go see whatever local produce is, whip it up, enjoy it.
Yeah, I love to cook as well. It's been a while, but I better get back into cooking soon. I've been traveling for work myself. But I'm just curious, what's your mindfulness practice?
So I absolutely adore an app called the Calm app.
Mm.
And it is something that you have to pay for, but I tell you what, it is worth every penny. And I have bought it as a gift for many, many people because I love it so much. And it has a couple of things that I really like. It has these things called sleep stories, which I listen to every night, and they're everything from nature stories to classic literature, to fairy tales. And then they also have various different meditations that anything from a minute to one that I like is called The Daily Trip, and it's 10 minutes long. And they even have something for those of you who think like that mindfulness is a bit inaccessible or, not something you'd be into. One of the things the Calm app does have is a how to meditate series. And it starts with the first one's like a minute long, and it's this brilliant introduction because, like, see, you just did it. It was 60 seconds. It's not that hard, you know? So I definitely would recommend that for folks. And it does, as we said, getting your body on side is so important to being able to really access your full cognitive function, you know?
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. I think you were the first person who introduced to me sleep stories, and then I started navigating the app that I use, Insight Timer, for sleep stories. And there's actually one that I listen to before bed, and it's really soothing just to listen to a
Yeah.
sleep story before bedtime. So the Calm app for you. Well, that concludes our chat today. And thank you so much, Lisa, for being here. If anyone would like to reach out to Lisa directly, I'll leave her contact details in the content of the podcast. And for everyone who's listening, thank you for being here, and look forward to our next podcast together. Thank you so much, Lisa. I had a lot of joy listening to your experience and your wisdom in interview coaching. I'm so happy you're here with us today.
Thank you, Leonie. It's been wonderful as always to chat with you. And I hope that the next time this happens, it's in person and we're in one of our kitchens cooking something up. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be awesome. Thanks, Lisa.
Pleasure. Bye for now.
Bye for now.